I'd like to pivot, if we could, into this Idaho DOI story. Okay, so last week, the Idaho Department of Insurance put out a notice about non-commissionable plans. It was actually on October 15th. And they had some pretty strong comments to make about this whole situation pertaining to their state of Idaho. Now, before anybody kind of gets their hopes up when they read this, I have some thoughts about this in terms of like their actual ability to enforce this. I mean, of course, they have ability to enforce it inside of their own state of Idaho, but ooh, you can't hear me?
No, I'm saying they have zero ability to enforce. I was silently commenting that I
Yeah,
don't think they have any ability to enforce what they said.
right. Which we'll get into that. We'll get into
Right,
that, right?
right, right, right.
But before we get too deep into the weeds on that, let me share my screen for those of you that are on our video audience. And of course, if you're on the audio audience, I'll read through the letter as well. Okay, so let's get a little
We
closer.
also have this linked in the comments as well for anybody who hasn't seen it. You want that hard copy, you want to share it with somebody. Mr. Randy, thank you so much for posting that in the comments for us.
Yes. Okay, so date that it comes out from the Department of Insurance, October 15th, 2025, to health insurance companies operating in Idaho from Dean L. Cameron, director. I can only assume that is the commissioner of that state. Subject.
Commissioner wasn't good enough for Dean. He's a director.
Yes.
He's a director.
And from Brad Little, your Idaho resident's governor, also has his name on this document. Okay.
Ooh.
So a little bit of a little bit of influence being thrown around, a little bit of weight being thrown around on said document. Okay, so the subject: unfair trade practices in marketing insurance products to Idahoans eligible for Medicare. Purpose: the purpose of this bulletin is to clarify the Idaho Department of Insurance's perspective on unfair trade practices that lead to manipulation of insurance market and withholding or denying access to products from Medicare eligible consumers, and the applicability of Idaho code to such practices. And then it continues on. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but essentially it says, this bulletin applies to all carriers and producers who offer any health insurance plans to Idahoans, I hope I'm saying that right, eligible for Medicare, including Medicare Advantage and Medicare supplement plans. It has been brought to the department's attention that some insurance carriers, including those offering Medicare Advantage plans, have attempted to restrict access to either removing the enrollment application from their website, which I have seen this happen multiple times as well, encouraging producers to avoid selling their products, or changing or discontinuing producer compensation. The department views these practices as unfair trade practice or method of competition under Idaho code, which prohibits any method of competition or act in the business of insurance that is unfair or deceptive, even if not specifically enumerated in statute. It is inappropriate and unfair practice with the potential for great harm to Idaho insurance consumers for carriers to restrict access to dissuade consumers from buying a product that was filled to market in Idaho and priced accordingly. To maintain fair compensation in these markets, carriers must, and then it has a nice little checklist here, make available and easily accessible their applications for enrollments in all forms, including printed, online, on their website, and through their appointed agents. So this is essentially saying that you have to make the application easily accessible through all channels, including through agents, which can only mean, I guess, paying commissions, allowing agents to sell it.
Yeah, that's how I interpret that.
Leaves a little bit up to interpretation. Not engage in convincing or suggesting their products not to be sold, marketed, or discouraging enrollment, which that kind of, again, goes It can go in terms of like suppressing plans, not making it readily, easily available. But I would say that has something to do with compensation as well. Not change compensation or commission mid-year, which is an interesting one, right? Because if they're not changing mid-year, when are they changing it? End of year? I don't know if that's any better. Provide compensation or commissions if the product they filed had built compensation into its rate development. So essentially, the way I'm reading this is when it gets filed with the state insurance department, if it's going to be commissionable at that time, it has to remain commissionable.
That seems, in my opinion, the most fair way for this to work. Just going on record right now and saying, I know we got a page 2 here.
And, compensation or commissions is not a buffer against a bad market or a method to bolster profits. Discontinuing commissions on any insurance products disincentivizes producers from marketing these products to those who need them. This practice is especially concerning when the carrier has appointed independent agents, has historically paid commissions for the same products, the rate development for the products included commissions, or the carrier did not provide advance notice that the plans would be zero commission only. This is probably the most clear statement I think there is in this whole document.
Yeah.
Very clearly basically saying that what we're seeing carriers doing, they cannot do. Now, we'll get into the specifics in a second here. It continues on to say, all carriers and producers operating in Idaho that offer insurance products to people eligible for Medicare act in good faith, blah, 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 right? There's a lot of fluff here. But that's kind of the crux of this conversation here. So I guess my first question is, upon reading through that, was when you saw that start to circulate and that was put out by the Department of Insurance in Idaho, what was your first reaction?
My initial reaction to this, I was honestly excited. I was happy. I was happy. There was this weird feeling that came over me. I wasn't sure what it was. It was joy, I guess. I'm not used to feeling it when I'm hearing things from the DOI, any DOI in the US, but it seems to me like this could potentially be the start of us gaining ground back on this entire situation. Here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing is what the carriers have done over the past few months to us, none of it was illegal. None of it was against the rules. Part of our agent agreement states that they can change the commissions on these plans at end. True or false? Is that not true, Christian?
It's true.
Right.
It's true.
So they're just playing by the rules that were given to them, right? It's not like even though we could go on record and be like, hey, that's unethical. That's not fair. Hey, you're screwing agents over right before AEP, etc. Yada, yada, yada. It's all by the rule book. So the only way we can have real change here is if the rules change.
Right.
So there was a lot in there that I loved. I mean, it sounds like a broker wrote it, right? I mean, it sounds like what we want. This type of stuff that I would hope NABIP and HAFA would just be, guns a-blazing, going in, trying to get this everywhere. So that was my initial reaction to it. There's a lot more we can get into, but let's hear your initial. What was your initial reaction when you saw this?
I had a lot of the same thoughts initially when I read it. I had two major thoughts. The first one was that is the right type of messaging to come from a Department of Insurance. I agreed with everything that they said, and I don't think it's good for the consumers long term. I don't think it's good for. I think it's not good for the industry. It's not good for the consumers. It's not good for anybody probably outside of the carrier. Number one. But my second thought that was essentially just as strong was, what ability does the Idaho Department of Insurance actually have to enforce this? Certainly they can enforce something like this within their own state. But that being said, when you're dealing with plans that are federally regulated, that essentially are plans that versions of them stretch in some cases across multiple states, if not the entire country, how do you regulate that? Let's say there's a let's say there's a situation where they can regulate it. What does that actually mean? Right? Like a lot of these carriers might look at it from the perspective of, look at some of the things that California did in the auto insurance space. They tried to regulate and squeeze some of these car insurance companies. And what happened? All the P&C companies were like, see you later, California. There's 49 other states we can focus on. So what you're
similar in
seeing,
Florida, right?
right? What you're seeing now is essentially a limitation of options of P&C companies and lack of competition in that market, which that could very easily happen as well, right? If it's just in Idaho,
Arches is coming back, baby.
Arches Healthcare,
Arches Healthcare, it's coming.
Government funded, okay.
Oh man!
But if this is exclusively and isolated to Idaho, it's very easy for carriers to be like, okay, we're not going to do business in Idaho now. So this only really has impact to me if a whole bunch of other DOIs got on board and it put pressure on CMS from a federal level. And I am positive that CMS is hearing a lot about this stuff. They're aware of this stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
It will probably come out in a final rule next year, would be my guess, where they bring the hammer down about this.
I mean, the good news is that there's no way a DOI with potentially a state governor backing this, right? Which I do want to say, it feels so weird being on the left. It feels so weird. It's visually bothering me so much. It's so funny that Daniel said that. I'm like lost on the left over here. I'm like, for the audio only audience, I got here first today for the first time in pod history, and I'm showing on the left.
And to be fair, it was Steve, I think, that pointed that out. Right?
Oh, sorry, Steve, not Dan. Did I say Daniel again?
Give credit where credit is due.
Yeah, shout out to Steve. Anyways, here's the thing. I do believe that CMS has to be aware of this entire situation now. Like, us complaining as agents, that's not necessarily going to get to the top level, but to have a director, commissioner of a state DOI plus a governor backing it, there's no way that doesn't get to the desk of Mr. Mehmet Dr. Oz right behind me. I hope you know what's going on, Mehmet. Idaho is very small. That's one thing to mention here. This isn't a Florida or a California or a Texas. This is a pretty small footprint of Medicare beneficiaries. However, I could see a proverbial wave where if we got 5 or 10 states that kind of release similar messaging, I think that basically puts CMS in a position where they have to pull the trigger. Like they would have to enact something that backs this, because the situation that we are going to be in, Steve, you're cracking me up. The situation we would be in if all of a sudden all these states have their own rules, most likely the carriers would pull out of those states, right? I mean, if Idaho's the only state that changes the rules, just like you said, the PNC, I think it's a great analogy. The PNC market, great analogy. What happens to those beneficiaries, right? Do we see even more term plans? Because these carriers are just like, we're out, deuces, see ya.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what's setting up right now, right?
Yeah. I mean, and Idaho is a market that was hit hard, relatively hard, and so I can't imagine it's a market that a lot of these carriers are looking at and they're salivating about. Ooh, Idaho, want that Idaho business. I don't think they are saying that.
Russet potatoes, give me those potatoes.
Airbnb on the lake at night, and Christian can't find out how to get in. It's pitch black. There's no lights. Idaho. Sorry. I'm going into trauma mode of my last visit to Idaho.
Oh my God.
It's midnight. It's the scene of Friday the 13th or something like that. Jason Voorhees comes out of the lake. I can't see his face. There's a hockey mask. Um, but anyway, no, I think that's exactly what it is. So in the scheme of things, the Idaho DOI coming out and stating this, my opinion, has extremely little impact on its own feet.
Right.
It could very well, though, lead to a domino effect from other DOIs coming out and providing similar messaging. And that could almost be like the spark that lights the flame
The
that
shot
could.
heard around the nation.
Yes.
Idaho, the Idaho director. Here's the bigger one of the bigger picture things. Steering, this whole CMS thing about steering, right? They were so passionate about stopping steering. Like, we got to stop steering. Steering's got to stop. You guys are steering, which that term in and of itself is just like, ugh. It's like, what are we cattle? Are we herding cattle? Like, steering? Like, but again, this was a huge initiative at the CMS level. And honestly, I would, I'm not going to speak for Christian, but I think most brokers agree that like steering shouldn't happen, right? Like,
Sure.
you don't want a Medicare beneficiary enrolled in a plan just because of a compensation model. Like, it should be because it's the best plan for them.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Like, that's pretty much like a universally agreed thing. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so popular, right? This is, all people on all sides of the spectrum here don't want steering to happen. But this non-commissionable plan thing that's going on, especially this year, it's causing steering, period. Hard stop. Steering is happening now more than ever because of what the carriers are doing, which, again, I said this earlier, they're playing by the rules. There's nothing they're doing that's illegal or breaking CMS rules by making these plans non-commissionable. They're just playing the game. But here we are. Now we're all steering. We're steering clients. Hey, this is how I can get paid. This is the only plan that I will get paid on.
I think I've said this for years, right? The government and CMS, everything they do might sound good intentioned on the surface, right? But what they're doing is they have good intentions that are essentially littered with corpses. Because everything that they try to prevent, they cause more of as a result.
Yeah.
Right? If you look at everything the government has done, a lot of people point to what's going on right now, including myself, to the Inflation Reduction Act as the biggest contributor, as the biggest factoring reason as to why we're seeing what we're seeing and so much shifting, right? So they do this, and again, it creates a domino effect. I said it the day that Inflation Reduction Act passed, or maybe it was within the week. Sorry, it might have not been the day, but within the week, I publicly put out my thoughts on what was going to happen. I didn't know this specifically was going to happen, but I knew there would be domino effects that would be negatively impacting agents, customers, everything else in between. Because when you squeeze the carriers are not slaves, right? The carriers are not like, if anyone at CMS is listening to this, like, the carriers are not your bitch. Like, they are very much.
The 9 people still working at CMS today are tuned in
if all
live,
9 of you
right?
are listening, the rest of you are at home, but the carriers have the ability to choose to play the game or not, or choose to maneuver based on the rules you provide them or not, right? So if you try to squeeze them too much, they're just going to adjust in a way that's advantageous for them and their shareholders and their profits and everything else in between. And not to say that you shouldn't regulate carriers, not to say that you shouldn't put rules in place, you should, but the way that the government's gone about it and the way that CMS has gone about it is just so dumb and idiotic, and it has been for a really long time. It's just...
So let's talk about the letter again, though. So let me ask you this. When typically during the year do you feel like most plans are filed at the state level?
I honestly have no idea. Let's ask good old Chatty G.
I was under the impression it was earlier in the year,
I believe so as well.
like April. That was my guess. I could totally be wrong. I would guess that most of these plans got filed at the state level by around April. That would be my guess. But I'd be curious to hear if Mr. Chatty G knows anything that we don't know here.
Okay,
If
so
that
yeah,
okay,
very
let's hear it.
accurate. Very accurate on your part, right? So
Thank you. Thank you.
fi-
Let the
filing
record show. I'm on the left
filing
today. I'm on the left today.
not the political left,
Yeah,
but
not the political
um
left, okay? Not the
so
political.
filing period, usually April through early May each year, submitted to the State Department of Insurances and the federal government via CMS. Purpose: carriers file proposed rates, benefits, networks, and forms for the following year. Review of approval, May through August. Filing approvals are issued August to September. November 1st for ACA anyway. Open enrollment begins for Medicare October 1st. Is when plans can be discussed. So now Medicare Advantage specifically, typically late February through early June is the actual filing period for those.
So let's say to play the role of creating an actual solution here, which the letter kind of mentioned this, but I think a really simple way of moving forward on this, because again, I understand at the carrier level why plans are going non-commissionable. I understand that they want to terminate these plans, but they can't without taking a huge hit to their star rating, right? We've talked about this a million times on the show already. So they're playing the game of suppressing a plan to terminate later, so that way it doesn't affect them negatively. So I understand all of that, but I think a simple solution here to avoid a lot of what we saw this year would be to go to the carriers and say, hey, you need to mention when you file the plan if it's commissionable or not. And there's no takebacks. No takebacksies, no changeies, no uh-ohs, oopsies, no October surprise, end of October, we're making these plans non-commissionable. Like, you can't do that because that causes steering, which we're all against. So I think a simple solution here that CMS could adopt would be saying something like, by the end of June, we need all of the plans that are going to be in effect for that following year. They have to be filed with the states that they're in, and you have to say if they're commissionable or not when you file. And that way, we all know way in advance. Think about that type of runway. Imagine if this year you had that much runway. July, August, September. That's a full 90 days before October 1st.